So let's start. Hello, everybody. Welcome to all. Welcome to this second day. We are very happy to have you with us. I'm very happy to see all these faces again the second day. Did you have a good time during your workshops? Yes, okay, that's lovely. So welcome to this roundtable on digital well-being. It's true that laptops, computers, phones, e-readers, and other screen-based technologies have undeniably improved our lives. Yet, they have also brought an overload of information and distraction. Our devices constantly demand our attention, sometimes for valid reasons and sometimes for not so valid reasons. Too often, we find ourselves pulled away from meaningful relationships, meaningful tasks, and the truth, to be drawn instead toward superficial and sometimes false content. Our attention and the attention of our students and teachers is a valuable resource, one that should be focused on the right sources at the right time without being hijacked by distractions. That's why this year in eTwinning we focused specifically on promoting a healthier relationship with technology, one that is grounded in informed choices. eTwinning teachers and students consciously, we hope by now, they decide how they engage with technology and information, ensuring it does not dictate their interactions or emotions. We know also that digital well-being isn't one size fits all. Every teacher, student, and parent have different needs, and this is why today we are here to discuss this really important matter. And we are here to explore these nuances together. Now, before we continue, let me also remind you that in May 2024, very, very recently, the European Commission published the Supporting Wellbeing at School New Guidelines for Policymakers and Educators. And there is specifically, and you can find this on the Europa domain, guidelines specifically for school leaders, teachers, and educators. So without further delay, I would like to introduce you to our wonderful panel. We have with us Juliane von Reppert-Bismarck from Detectors, which is an award-winning and journalist-driven media literacy organization working with schools and with teachers across Europe to counter the corrosive effect of online disinformation and online polarization on democracy. We have with us Beybin Tunc from COFACE Families Europe, which is a Europe-wide network organization advocating for families of all types without discrimination, promoting their well-being and ensuring their voices are heard in EU decision-making. And then, last but not least, Martens from European Schoolnet, representing Better Internet for Kids, a portal that provides information, guidance, resources on better internet issues from the joint InSafe InHope network of safer internet centers in Europe. Our guests have really important information to share with us. After the presentations, I'm sure and I hope that we are going to have an engaging discussion like the one we had yesterday. So let's have our first guest, Hans. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So indeed, I'm Hans, European Schoolnet, and I'm here to present to you the Better Internet for Kids perspective on digital well-being. And perhaps let me start by saying there's a lot I could tell you about Better Internet for Kids, but I would recommend you to go to betterinternetforkids.eu, where you will read more. So it's quite a big initiative which we are running on behalf of the European Commission. And as Chris has already mentioned, we work very closely with a network of safe internet centers. So in a lot of the things I will talk about today, I will be referring to the work they do at national level. So they are really the organizations on the ground who raise awareness, provide educational resources, provide helpline counseling, and also provide a point where citizens can report illegal content. When we talk about digital well-being at an eTwinning conference, I think it's quite likely we end up talking about mobile phones and banning them or not. I think we had a bit of that yesterday, but I think for me, the purpose for today, when approaching it from a Better Internet for Kids perspective, is to take a slightly more holistic approach. So I think if we think about children, young people, and the experiences they are having online, so it's definitely about autonomy. It's about them finding a balance between the benefits and the drawbacks. It's about safety, but it's about so much more. So it's also about skills, competences. It's about the emotions they experience when they go online. It's about the relationships they develop. It's about digital media encouraging them to be creative. It's about the identities they learn to construct. It's about diversity, equity, inclusion. So it's about a lot of things. And I would also encourage everyone, when you think about digital well-being, try to think of it with a concrete child in mind based on the real online presence and digital habits they have, in line also with their developing capacities and how all of this is changing as they get older. So just to get a bit of a snapshot, there is the very young child, and we know they go online at an increasingly young age. Even if they are in their primary school years, they already become increasingly independent. There's quite a lot of things they do in terms of playing games, accessing videos. When they are in their transitional years, 9, 10, 11, a lot of them have access to social media profiles, some of them have devices. We know that many of these have actually not been designed with the best interest of children in mind, and actually, if we follow the terms and conditions, probably they should not be there. If you think about teenagers, we know there's a lot they do online. They encounter risk. A lot of that is not problematic per se, but I do think there are some examples, risks, and sometimes also harm that we would not want to tolerate in an offline world. So I think the idea is a bit, how do we get into a place where the digital world is age appropriate? There's an awful lot of risks you could think of. So in our field, we often talk about the 4 Cs. It's about content, it's about conduct, it's about contact, it's about consumer risks. And each of them could have an impact on health and well-being. I think when you think about the commission, new commissioners coming in place, some of the priorities being formulated, we see a lot of that coming back. So it's partly about young people and having access to potentially harmful content. It's about children, young people experiencing bullish behavior. It's about hate speech. It's about the manipulative online marketing techniques we see. And indeed, for each of these, there are certain risks. Sometimes risks are okay, sometimes risks turn into harm. And I think that's a bit of the wider set of risks we would typically think of from a Better Internet for Kids point of view. But we always try to see the risks in connection also with the opportunities. So everyone knows that the digital world also offers a lot of opportunities for learning, for play, for civic participation. It just happens to be the case that often the behavior we see tends to be somewhat passive. So I think the idea also from an educational point of view is to encourage people to get more creative, to access different types of content services, and to get the best out of the availabilities online. So how does this translate to a policy point of view and some of the practices we do? So all of the work we do on Better Internet for Kids is guided by this Better Internet for Kids vision for a better internet for children and young people. So that's, in a nutshell, the European Commission vision on age-appropriate digital services with no one left behind, with every child in Europe protected, empowered, and respected online. And to turn that into a bit more of a child-friendly language, so basically we have 3 pillars, and we want children and young people to have a safe internet. We want them to feel comfortable, and we also want them to have their say. So it's about protection, it's about empowerment, but it's also about respect and participation. And what I would like to do in the following slide is just to give a couple of specific examples in terms of the developments we see, also the good practices we encounter. And I think that then some of these can come back later on also in the Q&A and in the discussions. So when thinking about protection, I think that's not something we can do on our own. So we need at European, at national level, probably at global level, we need good legislative regulatory frameworks. In the past, there was a lot of talk about AVMSD, about GDPR. I think the last 2 years, we've seen a bit of a game changer within Europe. So there is the Digital Services Act. And I think that's really the first time where there is a concrete set of rules for online platforms, in particular the bigger online platforms, where we are expecting them to ensure high levels of security, privacy, safety for children and young people online. And if you think of the big online media platforms, and we've actually seen some of the formal investigations which may have been reported also to you in your national media, so TikTok, X, Meta, they're under quite a bit of scrutiny now, because there is this feeling that in terms of risks and putting in place the required risk mitigation measures, probably they're not doing enough. In the past, I think there's been a lot of carrots, but now there's also a stick. So there's attempts to hold them accountable and also to do better. Of course, you don't just need regulation, you also need some kind of enforcement. You also need citizens who are aware of the rights they have. Also, if they see problems, they need to be able to report. So that's why we work together with the centers to try to raise awareness together with children and young people in schools about the rights that children and young people have, but also provide reporting opportunities. So we have a network of helplines. These helplines have good connections in the different countries with, for example, the education system, but they also have a direct line with a lot of the big online media platforms. So if there is an issue, if something really needs to be escalated very soon, as an individual citizen, you might feel powerless, but if you can go to one of these trusted resources, it's actually quite likely that the big platforms will respond to them, because again, thanks to the DSA, they have a requirement to do as such, and if not, it will come with consequences. I think protection is important, but it's for us actually what we want to get out of the way so we can really focus on what we care most about. So it's about the empowerment, it's about skills, it's about competences, it's about really pushing children and young people to be creative online, to be active. So that's why as part of BIG, together with the network of centers, we have a whole variety of education resources. If you go to our teacher corner on the BIG platform, you will see that we provide a lot of materials which make it easy for teachers to understand what it means to talk about children's rights in a digital world. We provide guidance on key topics, but we also push people to think of it from a whole school policy perspective. So it's not just about teaching about it, it's also about having the right policies in place, making sure that you have the required tools, services, platforms that you are using within the education environment. So I would definitely encourage everyone to have a look at our website, where you will find these different topics coming back and a lot of guidance on what to do in that regards. And then the final point is that it's not just about protection and empowerment, it's also about participation, it's about consulting the children, the young people. I think yesterday there was this idea of, if you want to ban mobile phones, then at least have a conversation with your children, young people, so they don't find out after the summer break that apparently something big has changed. And I think we want to do the same with teachers. So we are currently in the process of also evaluating together with the Commission the Better Internet for Kids Plus strategy. And we really want to call upon teachers as well to give their view to us so we can build on that and try to deliver to them the resources, the materials that are most useful, meaningful for them.
Thank you very much. And I know that we can now proceed with Juliane and listen and listen to the Detectors' point of view. And Juliane, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is the slide showing? Is that the right slide? Should we go? Oh, I'm doing it. There we go. Excellent. Lovely. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak. I missed yesterday's events, but I heard that there was an awful lot of talk of what does hardware do to the children, and obviously what does the software and the content that they get via the software do to children. And this is something that we think about very deeply at Lie Detectors, so I'm really delighted to take a moment now to talk to you a little bit about online information isolation, which I think is a very important issue to take into account when we're talking about digital well-being. And because we're in Brussels, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the perspective of teachers, but also the perspective of policymakers who are so well represented in this city. So, as Christoph said, we're an independent and journalist-driven media literacy organization, and our aim is to counter the corrosive effect of the online polarizing and disinforming world on children, give them the kind of tools that they need, but also to teachers. And basically what we're doing is we're wanting to create a virtuous circle, because we see the problem with polarization, online isolation, and disinformation as being one that really needs to be tackled from 2 points of view, demand and supply. Demand, that's us, all of those of us who click on things, share them, spend ages online, don't talk to the person sitting next to us, right? We all do it. And supply, that is what we call at lie detectors the drivers of polarization and disinformation, and that to us means not necessarily individual actors like Russian bots or things that other people think about, which is also very important, but to us the drivers of disinformation are really the large online platforms that are working on a profit-driven algorithm that exacerbates polarization and exacerbates the virality of harmful content. And so we really think, how do I go? Can I go backwards? Yes, oh, thank God. We really think that these things need to be tackled as a whole. So we do, if you look at the top right-hand picture, we send more than 300 journalists every year into more than 1,200 individual classrooms to work with children aged 10 to 15. And I think Hans's slide was really interesting in showing just how active that age group is online. And that interaction in front of the teachers with the children has actually very organically led to us working with eTwinning and with other teacher training organizations as teacher trainers. We're training up an awful lot of you as multipliers so that you can talk about this very important issue fluently and without fear. The analysis and the feedback that we get, we work with a lot of questionnaires, feeds straight into policy recommendations. And there we were a member of the high-level expert group on fake news and online disinformation that led to various accompanying parts of the Digital Services Act that Hans was just talking about now. So it's there's a very intimate relationship between the on-the-ground work that we do and finally the sort of advice that we can give on a policy level and the things that we can be pushing for. And so these are the numbers that we're very proud of. We're very big. We're probably Europe's largest organization of its kind, working in different languages and in different formats. And that's all fairly self-explanatory. This is what it looks like when we're working with children. I've not added any pictures of teachers for some reason, but so we go from classrooms that are very analog, like the center one that you can see, where there's really no online connection whatsoever, and we have to talk about digital issues in a totally analog way, all the way to very highly equipped schools, and we see that the need is equal in these schools. It's not that the richer schools have got children that are more resilient. That's actually not the case. And you have to imagine that when these children come and sit in the classroom, outside the pandemic, in the pandemic, in the pandemic at home, or in hybrid classroom settings, and then afterwards, normally in the classroom, they come up to us and they say, "This is what we worry about." And this slide is a little bit more pandemic, so you'll see the very large conspiracy theories here, but chain letters, conspiracy theories, why does fake content exist? What can I do about it? What are the tools that are out there for me? And that's the content, but another issue that we really are beginning to address more is the way that this content reaches us. It reaches us in very pixelated ways through our preference settings, and it's customized to our preferences in a way that actually makes real meaningful contact more and more difficult. And we're no longer sharing an information space. It's very important to be very aware of that. We're alone in our filter bubbles, in our echo chambers. We're alone with our preferences, and we're very often entirely unaware of this, and entirely unaware that the person sitting next to us is in a totally different information space than the one that we're in. So I'm going to actually put it over to you. I'm going to ask you to please put up your hands. We're going to be a little bit interactive. Tell me if, to inform yourselves about the world, in the past week, you have been on Facebook. Hands up. Okay. How about LinkedIn? How about X? How about Blue Sky? Oh, and WhatsApp? Oh, I see, wow. What about YouTube? Okay, what about Instagram? Wow, what about TikTok? And Snapchat? And Fortnite? And Twitch? Okay, All right, so you can see what I'm getting at. What about Reddit? Right? Okay, wonderful. Now, bear in mind what you've just told me, because I'm going to show you what 600 teachers and about 8,000 students told us where they were, okay? And it's not very unlike what you've just told us. So first of all, this is where teachers tell us they get their information from, like you, lots of YouTube, lots of Instagram, other, I think, is Google searches, lots of WhatsApp, lots of Facebook. Now, check what the children tell us. Okay, so this is very different. Everywhere where you see an orange line that's really unaccompanied by blue, that is where the children are on their own. Okay, this is where you don't know what they're watching because you're not there. And these information spaces are very telling because they're very largely image and video based. And second, many of them are encrypted, which means outside external moderation, content moderation, any kind of external help is pretty much impossible. What that means is that they really do need the tools. And it shows also that when you're talking to them in your classroom, you can't make assumptions about what they're seeing, what they're worried about, what it is that they are, that is confronting them. And so I'm just going to make a pretty radical, next slide is a little bit something that you don't normally see at an EU presentation. So this is the woman who trained me, who's a clown, and I would posit to you that one of the very big things that we need to all do is to ask questions and to say, I don't know. And when you're in the classroom, literally give the floor to the children so that you can first of all find out what it is that is worrying them, what it is that they're actually consuming. You're the ones that can talk to them about this in a safe space and make it into a safe conversation as well. And I would say that you want to make sure that by starting the conversation, you're getting them out of their filter bubbles, out of their echo chambers, and engaging in the messy middle, in the messy grey middle, which is the only place where we can actually meet one another. On a policy level, now back to a very boring slide. Policy recommendation, I'm not going to go through all of them because I think I'm out of time, but really we've got to, on a policy level, think about the financial drivers of disinformation and polarization. We've got to address the algorithms that are profit-centered and that don't need to be profit-centered, but they are profit-centered, and they are making the most of our preferences and not helping us come together as a society or as individuals. And that, I would say, is one of the key things to re-establish for our communal well-being and individual well-being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliane. Please keep your questions. We have one more presentation from Beybin, and then we will have a lovely conversation. So, Beybin, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation, and also, I know I'm the last speaker, so thank you so much for your last attention. Thank you, and let's do it. My name is Beybin Tunc. I work as Senior Education Program Coordinator at COFACE Families Europe, and today I'm going to talk about digital well-being and families. And whenever I prepare a presentation, I always go to search stock images just to see the stereotypical perspective on the topic. So when I search digital well-being and families, I found this perfect family, very happily sitting together, and then everyone has their own devices, they are online but yet connected, maybe they only have one couch and this is their connection solution, I don't know. But I'm just asking you, is this a reality? Like, I don't know your families, but my family doesn't look like that when it comes to digital well-being. So I want a little bit of self-reflection and a bit confession time with you. So my question to you is, what type of family member are you when it comes to digital well-being? Like, you can just show it with your fingers, like just the first image that resonates with you regarding your position in the family. You can show me your fingers. I see some, none of them, some fingers also mixed, some smiley, guiltily smiling faces also. So I assume that this is reflecting more reality, actually, of the families than this perfect family image that I found from the stock images. So, I know that when I was invited to talk about families and digital well-being here, I imagine some of you were maybe expecting answers to the questions like, okay, what should be the ideal screen time for kids? Or should I be worried about which content? Should I be stricter or should I keep it cool as a parent and so on? Let me disappoint you from the beginning that whatever solution that I can or I may give to you right now can be outdated by tomorrow. And let's be real about the families also, because they are really, really different than each other. And also families are a group of individuals with different needs and motives, actually. So it's also not ending there. We really need to dive deep into all those things in order to find a solution. So let's start with really accepting and embracing the complexity of the topic. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave that I cannot give you a solution, so goodbye. But instead of trying to give you a bit one-size-fits-all answer, I decided to share that some key ideas about how we can include families in the digital well-being discussion, actually, like really going beyond restrictions, more towards resilience, which I stole from the yesterday's keynote speech, which I totally agree that thinking about beyond restrictions towards resilience. And the first thing let me start with the first thing is whole family approach. The first thing we need to take is this thinking that digital well-being is beyond just parents and kids, parents versus kids, but it's broader than that. Like digital well-being impacts every member of the family. It's not only kids, not only parents, not only the conflict in between them. It's not about also only kids and screen time, but we have to think about for example, the older family members, how we can protect grandparents from online scams, or the adult members of the family, of how maybe work notifications affect your family time. So I can really list hundreds of cases like that in the family context. And each family members, I want to highlight this sentence, each family member has different needs, different skills, and different vulnerabilities when it comes to technology. So this is why hashtag lifelong learning, hashtag intergenerational learning are the key things. Especially when it comes to technology, you cannot stop learning. And families, I think, should really learn to learn from each other in an intergenerational sense. So talk about each other's needs and vulnerabilities, and the goal should be really consulting each other, every member of the family in the decision-making process. Secondly, yet it shouldn't be a sole burden on families. Digital well-being is a shared responsibility, and it's not something that families should handle alone. Same like educators. I think from yesterday's speech, also my takeaway was like, schools giving to the families, families giving to the responsibility schools, but actually children want to take it themselves, so it's kind of a vicious circle, but actually it's a shared responsibility. We need multiple stakeholders involved, and everyone brings their own expertise in the topic. So whenever I say like, yeah, multiple stakeholders come together and decide on certain topics, I always imagine this UN New York Assembly, like with the wooden chairs and so on. No, it doesn't need to be always like that. It is important, but I just wanted to give you a short example what it may look like. This is from my work actually as COFACE Families Europe, our expertise topic is families and social rights, and we partner up with CUMOP Education Hub from Greece. They are specialized in school education and bullying, and then we develop an e-learning course funded by European Commission about school bullying management for educators but also parents, because approach should be aligned between different stakeholders, otherwise it's not working. And I just wanted to give you an example just to show you how a shared responsibility between NGOs also can look like. And lastly, I think if a sentence summarizes COFACE Families' approach to families can be really like recognizing that not all families are the same. Families come in many different forms. So single parents are different than multi-generational, or families with disabilities, transnational families. So not only the concept of digital well-being, but also the concept of well-being may differ from family's reality to another family's reality. So when we really need to think about a bit intersectional when we approach the families, not taking them as one family everyone is having the same family. So we need to create policies and services that are more inclusive and consider the unique needs of each family, and design solutions for families, not only for families, but with families also, really consulting them to bring their own realities and relevances into the topics. And yeah, I'm just going to conclude you, just to give you the discussion starting points, and really like 3 points that you may remember. A whole family approach that recognizes the needs of every family member, and also digital well-being is a shared responsibility. It requires collaboration between families, educators, communities, policymakers, you name it, and or systems should be inclusive and diverse, reflecting the reality of the family structures. It was just a quick overview, and thank you so much for your attention. If you want to connect or give me some feedback, here's the QR code for my LinkedIn, so I'm looking forward to further discussions about it. Thank you.
Well, you don't need to turn off this. Yeah, it's fine. Well, many thanks to all, and it's quite interesting to know the position of each organization. And then my question is, as a first question, and then I hope that we are going to have the audience participating. Now, before going into this roundtable discussion, I had to make a little bit of course, research myself. So there is already an ongoing research going and ongoing investigation in the United States. There are 45 states at the moment suing Meta. They are talking about that the company knowingly use actually features on its platforms to cause compulsive use. And then we don't see this only in the US. We see this also happening now in Europe. I think that it was May 2024, and I'm checking my notes now. The EC opened actually formal proceedings against Meta. And the idea is under the Digital Services Act, and the EC is concerned that social media may stimulate behavioral addictions in children and create the rabbit hole effects. There are also issues on age assurance and verification methods, as Hans also mentioned. So, according to you, how pragmatic do you think it's the conversation between megatechs and families and policy makers?
It's a huge question, so I'm just looking, so not only for me, I guess.
Yeah, it's for everybody.
Okay.
So, but we can begin with you, or we can, yeah, sure.
Maybe I'll have a first jab at that. So yes, this is what we think about a lot as well. And obviously now there's some really interesting, some new findings from neurology and cognitive psychology that show, first of all, that online engagement releases, I don't know, endorphins or something, right? There is something there that, chemically in our brain, is activated by the time we spend on screens and by the activities and engagement and feedback that we get via our engagement on screens. And I also am really buoyed by the fact that there's some new research also that shows that if people are aware of it, then they can better resist it. So if we are aware that we're sitting in a filter bubble and that we're being fed stuff that's keeping us on the screen and that's making us nod or angry or whatever it might be, or sharing, if we know that we're being fed this information because some piece of AI has figured out our preferences, even without us necessarily ticking some box or something, if we know that we're being targeted for our preferences in order to stay on screen, then we are more capable of resisting the polarizing effect of what we're seeing. So, and I think that's really helpful to know. And again, that puts the onus on you, the teachers, and perhaps the parents and the families, to really raise this in conversations, to raise awareness, and to create resilience, democratic resilience.
Thank you very much, Juliane. And what about you, Hans, and from a big better internet for kids perspective, do you think that there is like any kind of best practices that you can actually highlight for us and for our teachers here today, where we can find a solution, regulate this at least, like not to ban, or even if sometimes maybe banning can be quite useful? What's your take on this?
So I think in general, and that was also a bit of the idea coming out of yesterday's presentation, I think we always need to be a bit careful when policies are led by moral panic. So if you look at some of the headlines and how it's sometimes portrayed, I think based on yesterday's presentation, I think there's good ground to sometimes put into question some of the panic. But then maybe what I missed a bit from yesterday's presentation is that not means that a lot of the tools and the platforms that children and young people are using are not developed with the best interest of children in mind. So I think there's a bit of this discrepancy that we should not be led too heavily by what we sometimes read in the media, but still I do think there is good ground to be very critical about some of the existing practices from some of the big platforms. And I think there is often a bit of a power imbalance, because who are you as an individual citizen to really respond to that? So from my point of view, if you look at something like the DSA, I think it's definitely a good practice in the sense that you see that there are a lot of changes which now all of a sudden seem possible, while actually in the past not so much of these changes were happening. If you look at how keen some of the big companies are now to show that they are making changes to their platforms, I think that's quite an important development. But I think also for the general public, we just need to be careful that we don't go from concern to then calling for bans. I think we should call for better platforms, better services, and for me that's in line with also the vision behind BIC. So it's really about, can we have age-appropriate platforms and services, and can we make sure that these indeed get the best out of the children's rights and the opportunities which are out there. So I think it's about finding a bit of that balance. I think regulation is really an important point, but like I mentioned also in the presentation, it should not be the end story. And I think a lot of these decisions, you also need to make them on a day-to-day basis in a specific context in which you are working. For example, if you are working in a school, okay, you can say, the DSA is there, so in future things will be better, but that doesn't really help you next week, and you may have very specific solutions you need. So in that particular case, by all means, if you think that putting in place certain restrictions is important, I think that's probably the way to go, as long as you keep in mind also the education aspect, the skills, the competences, and also the importance of getting children, young people, and also teachers around the table when you are having these kind of discussions.
Please.
I think from family's perspective, the first thing that I would like to bring is the access to the information also. Like, I don't know how many families, if they are not working in the field or they are not super curious about that, checking these regulations and so on. So I think making the knowledge accessible is very, very important, so families can really reach out and understand what is there actually. So I find that education is a very good prevention method, and also community education in that sense, and also bringing education to the families, but also bring families into the education. So I find it a bit discussion of really the accessibility to the knowledge, information discussion. So I think we really need to also ease the language for, as I mentioned, the diversity of the family types, and really making it accessible so they can really understand and find their ways to implement it in their households, or check it if necessary, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's very true, and at the same time, something that people know, but in July, the next European Commission actually already mentioned their new political guidelines for 2024 and 2029, and it is expected that there will be an EU-wide launch inquiry on the broader impacts of social well-being, and will tackle unethical techniques used by online platforms. And going to the unethical practices, I was actually quite surprised. Now I'm just gonna consult my notes again, because at one point I was reading this really good article on a newspaper, and I'm not going to promote now the newspaper, but apparently there was actually a push to win teenagers, 100%, and that was from Meta, and that in one of the exchanges of Zuckerberg was actually top priority for the company in 2017 is teens. it's actually said very, very loudly and clearly. And how do you think that like families, I don't know, it's a bit frightening for families and also like for an organization working for families to have to deal that, oh my goodness, my kids are actually the target of these big high-tech giants?
It's for me, it's a bit hard answer to give, like speak from the all family perspective all around the Europe. So I think it's also good discussion for the participants. Like, what do you think about that? But again, like I will really, I think for COFACE's approach and also me as an education program coordinator, I will really again put the education there. Like really, this plans needs to be understandable by the family perspective. So like making it's very on the local level, but also making it in the realities and relevant to the families, explaining them our role of maybe NGOs also working in this topic. So I think multi-stakeholder approach is very, very important in that regard, rather than tech companies, families now understand each other kind of. I think that middle organizations are very necessary to promote what it actually means, what is the effects actually means, or vice versa. So that's my opinion in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much. And Juliane, one more question for you. You talked about demand and supply. You talked about demand and supply. And how, do you think that we can actually influence the supply?
We as, okay, that's the $1 million question, right? That depends on things like how well is the Digital Services Act being implemented? Is the code of practice working? And for those of you blank when you hear things like that, I can tell you we've been looking at this for a really long time. The European institutions have committed themselves to really looking very carefully at what the algorithms of the platforms are doing. Is there a link between the advertising revenue business model, or micro-targeting as we know it, and the dissemination and proliferation of harmful content? These are questions that it's in the power of the European institutions to find out. They need to be asking these questions unflinchingly, even though there is an awful lot of pressure for them not to. And they also need to be reopening, as I think that they will, the e-commerce directive to look at copyright, particularly in view of the AI, the proliferation of AI. What does that mean for our creative industries, the longevity and sustainability of creative industries in Europe? And we know that that's going to take time, and we're up against, very, very big interests and very, very large sums of money. And that's why we can't really wait for that policy change to come into effect, for someone to wave a magic wand and for it to all go away. That's why media education is so important. That is why talking about digital citizenship, digital well-being, media literacy, algorithm literacy, all of that is so critically important, because that is possible. And you can go into a classroom and you can talk to children, and they will be receptive, and they do want the tools, and the tools are not rocket science. They really aren't. They're simply about engaging system 2, waiting a moment, breathing, and then making a decision, and then acting. And it's actually really boiled down, you just teach the children to breathe, and you've already made some magic happen.
True, many thanks. So since we are talking about teachers now and students, and that's the perfect actually time to open the floor to you, because you are teachers that you took part in this year in the annual theme, and the annual theme was well-being at school. So tell us, what is your opinion? Do you have any questions for us? This is an open discussion. Yes, please. They bring to you, yes.
I have a question for Jana. I'm sorry if it's your name, like for light detectors, yes. I come from a country where we want to implement media literacy in teaching English. So we want to have, because we teach from the same book, all the country.
So I'm just going to, yes. Yes, okay. Okay, yeah.
So I was wondering, do you think that it is okay for the countries to have in the national syllabus or curriculum to have media literacy as something that is obligatory to study? Or do you think it should be for example, what you've done is a good job, you've come journalists to school, but this is one encounter per year maybe. But what about every single day for the teachers to have the skills to be able to teach media literacy for students from the younger age to the older ones into understanding what it means well-being in this digital world?
So one thing I have to say is I'm hard of hearing, so I'm having trouble hearing the question. But I think you've asked me what format should this teaching by the teachers take, right? Should it be daily?
Yes, actually they want to know if media literacy should be an obligatory from now on teacher in the curriculum rather than to be with an organization that goes once per year in the school and have a visit.
So I could talk about this for several hours, okay? But the short answer is, first of all, digital literacy, the ability to assess what you're receiving on your screen for its veracity and for its purpose and for its content and for its sourcing, it's something that will allow you to understand whether it's true or not, to make sense of the world. And therefore, this digital media literacy really ought to be considered as a core literacy alongside core literacies like reading and writing and counting. And therefore, yes, it should be in the powers of every teacher, just like every teacher teaches reading and writing, and many of them teach counting as well, to talk about this from their own perspective, from the perspective of their own subject. That's not rocket science either, but it does take a lot of curricular change. There are countries where a transversal approach like that is already in place. I believe Finland, for instance, is always the poster child. There are other countries such as Austria, which 2 years ago decided that basic digital competences should be a separate subject area. And while we don't, at Lie Detectors, we don't quite share that view that it should be put in the side over there somewhere, that always risks then being taught badly or cut when there's a pandemic or something, We do see that also has that benefit. In Austria, we get a lot of demand now of people wanting teacher training because they've been told they need to teach it. They don't know how to teach it. So at least there's public funds now. There's another question now, the reason why we, external experts, journalists, are going into classrooms is not because we're pedagogues, we're not. But we are fixing an immediate problem that teachers tell us they don't feel confident or capable or incentivized to teach themselves. Therefore, we see ourselves as a stopgap, and we hope that one day this will just be a normal part of the curriculum and the journalists can go back to doing journalism. When that will happen, I'm not sure.
Maybe just to complement a bit from a European Union perspective. So I think you will struggle to find within the EU a single country where there is not a requirement in the curriculum somehow to cover a topic like media literacy. I think the problem is that it's often in competition with so many other things that schools have to do. So I think definitely over the years you see it's getting increased prominence and it's getting increasingly important, in line also with the importance that we as a society as a whole give to topics like digital literacy. But you see that in practice that doesn't necessarily mean that it happens. I think we should continue to invest in the policy dimension to make sure that it is there. I also think that specific initiatives which focus, for example, on media literacy in teacher education are really essential, because there you really find ways to make sure that teachers are very confident to do it. And then if it's in a separate subject, if it's across the curriculum, for me, there's pros and cons each way, but I think what matters most is that teachers perceive there to be a low barrier to do it in practice, and that indeed there is this incentive for them that actually it's part of what they are supposed to do.
Thank you, Juliane. Thank you, Hans. Do you have other questions from the audience? Does this mean that you are very, very tired? Okay, there you are.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Really, it's a great topic. Thank you for this informative presentation. I think for me, I'm eTwinning ambassador from Tunisia. My name is Mania Mahmoudi. I'm also ICT teacher. I think at my school and my Ministry of Education, the role of ICT teacher is teaching digital literacy and media literacy. I meet my students 1 hour per week, and who other will teach them media literacy and digital literacy. Many teachers in my country don't train it about digital literacy, don't use digital tools. They don't know how to use it. So I always try to invite them to join our great community, but I find you will help me, who will help us and who will come with us to train my colleagues to talk about digital literacy, because I think it's the objective or the aim of all the society. The whole school and the whole ministry have to train teachers, have to talk every day, because our children are digital citizens. And now we talk about digital identity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this comment. Would you like to reply?
Yes, I'd love to reply to that. So yes, absolutely, children are digital citizens and very often a lot more fluent and confident than adults and their teachers in many respects. However, what they are not is they're not equipped necessarily to view things in context, to differentiate between the kind of sources that they're getting. You know, lie detectors was started by me because I happened upon young people who were telling me that a viable news source was called Instagram, you know? And so they can't tell the difference between a source and a platform. That's a problem. Adults can. They don't need to be digital citizens to be able to explain that. Trust me, all of those things that I asked you to raise your hand if you use those platforms to inform yourself, I'm not on half of them. The thing is to have the courage to go into a classroom and admit to the children in the classroom, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I do know that it's important. Can we start talking, please? And come with what, there's recently some guidelines on how to do this, which I encourage you to read, by the way. They were done by the European Commission with an expert group, and we co-authored them. But one of the things that we encourage there is just a question-led approach, which I know that teachers are supposed to stand in the front of the class and have all the answers, but not in this. You're not going to be able to broach it if you're waiting to have all the answers before we can talk about it. Don't wait. Even if you've got questions, put the questions to the kids. That's what you know, what we definitely say. That's why I had the clown slide up there.
Beybin, would you like to complement?
Maybe add the intergenerational learning there again and lifelong learning. So I think I totally agree with it's not always like teacher teach me something approach, but also we can learn many things from the pupils or also in family context from the youngsters and so on. So just sometimes showing interest about what do you look on TikTok and so on, even though you don't care about it or something, make change, because like they also have so much potential and even wider knowledge than we may have from certain digital tools and so on. So I will highlight intergenerational learning in that regard and totally opening a space in schools or families to really bring their knowledge also, not from there to there, but sometimes just opening the space for that to come out can work, maybe just an additional idea. Yeah, thank you.
You are from Armenia, right? Tunisia, okay. I'm sure we can find organizations in your country who are very passionate about these kind of topics, and I think there are these existing networks within Europe, but also globally. So even after the session, come to us. We have contacts also with organizations who work on online safety in Tunisia, and I'm sure there's ways also to make these kind of connections, just like everyone is trying to do here as part of the eTwinning community.
And let's not forget above all that the CSS and eTwinning and on the European School Education Platform, you can find millions of webinars on digital well-being at the moment, and it was actually our annual theme for 2024. And we hope that we actually managed to address this subject with you. So the platform is always there. There is a rich of articles, experts, videos, and recordings of webinars as well. And that actually is for everybody to know. Do we have more questions? Yes.
Thank you. I like the idea that digital well-being should include the whole family, but in my view, it should include the whole person of the students, his body, heart, and mind. The more time students spend on internet, the more they become alienated from reality, estranged from reality. So, concerning media literacy, algorithm literacy, and digital literacy, are there some strategies for teachers to use or deploy in the classroom in order to convince students that internet is harmful? Too much time in internet is harmful. How can we do that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the final part of the question?
Concerning media literacy, if the students are media literate, means that they are aware, that too much time, if they spend too much time on internet, they know it's dangerous. Is there some strategies, that teacher can use in order to convince the students, that spending too much time on internet is detrimental to their health, their mental health, physical health?
So thank you. I think the general feedback, it's also what was mentioned yesterday in the keynote presentation. It's not so much how much time they spend, it's what they do. So I think often when you think it's just about time, maybe you should try to have a conversation about what it is that they are doing. And I think there are really good examples of studies who try to differentiate a bit more specifically. So they look into certain types of online behavior which may be more harmful, but others which may be more creative. But I think it's really important that we move away a bit from this idea that time is bad per se. I think yesterday the comparison was if you spend a lot of time on your laptop writing a PhD, probably most people would say that's a good thing. So I'm not saying that everyone on a mobile phone is writing a PhD, but maybe they're doing very interesting creative stuff. So I think that would be my first suggestion. And then there's lots of resources out there which try to actively empower and get young people to do active stuff. And I think sometimes that works better than telling them that there is something they should not do. So I think that's perhaps a general recommendation.
I'm not sure if we have more questions. On that note, I recognize that everybody is actually quite tired from today's workshops, and I would like to thank a lot our panelists, Beybin, Juliane, and Hans. We are very lucky to have such active, supportive partners on this very important matter. And I think that we can safely say that we are going to close this session for today. Please do not forget that there is a dinner at 7:30, and what else? Sorry? Oh, and the address is to be found on your badge. Many thanks to all, and have a lovely evening and afternoon.